I've been a regular attendee of PEG talks and now the 3 talks, and always found them really inspirational. So hopefully I can do it justice. I'm kind of used to giving presentations, often to hundreds and hundreds of people, but I'm actually a lot more nervous doing this. I think it's a different dynamic, isn't it? A bit closer to home as well. I could have stood up here and just given you a rundown of all the work things, the projects I've been involved in over the last 10 years or so, which for some of you I think probably would have been quite interesting. But a lot of the best PEG talks, 3 talks that I've seen haven't just been about the work they're doing. It's been about the interaction between their work and their personal lives. And that was something that is quite close to my heart. And I think it's something that all of us will have gone through at some point. So it's going to sound very dour, but my presentation is about work-life balance. Yes! And ironically, having decided to talk about work-life balance, I found myself this week being so rushed off my feet, preparing tenders, getting kids to beavers, attending meetings, swimming classes. I haven't had as much time as I'd have liked to prepare this. So it's certainly not a slick TED talk where I learned it all off by heart. So I'm going to be using notes, but yeah, hopefully it's of interest to people. So to start off, a couple of questions for you guys. Who here is currently working or has worked at some point? Everyone, right? Who here enjoys their work? I think we're quite privileged in that respect. It's not often the case. Who wishes they could spend more time with family and friends? Well, that was a slow one. Okay. Generated a lot of discussion, and I think work-life balance as a topic, I think it does. Everyone seems to have a strong opinion about it. The term often appears to be the preserve of modern middle-class Western society, and often it's dismissed as such. But the concept of people working long hours, negatively impacting on personal life, surely applies across the board. If you think of single mothers juggling 3 jobs just to put food on the table, through to CEOs working stupid hours, getting divorced. I really think it applies to everyone. So it's not something to be dismissed. Now some argue that balancing career and lifestyle is necessary for overall happiness. Some don't think that makes sense at all. Others argue that it's completely unrealistic and that we're making ourselves unhappy by even trying to pursue it in the first place. Now, work-life balance isn't a new thing. In the Industrial Revolution, the idea of evenly splitting each workday, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for play, 8 hours for sleep, was seen as revolutionary. And work-life balance suddenly became a really political issue. Unfortunately, the reality of where we are now is it's often skewed in favour of work. Progress has been made to some extent over the last decade, certainly in the UK, with the introduction of flexible working, and politically some interesting ideas are coming about. A lot of discussion about standardising a 4-day working week, and maybe even introducing a basic income for all. But then we all know the kind of climate we've got at the moment: austerity, we've got zero-hour contracts, stagnant wages, and they're all contributing to putting even more pressure on people to work long hours and take on multiple jobs. Now, how does that relate to my own personal experience? And it's only since having kids that I've been conscious about my own work-life balance. I grew up in Mumbles, one of 4 boys. And my father was away for long periods of time, so big respect to my mother. But that was something that I was very conscious of when I grew up, that I wanted to have more focus on the family than maybe the experience that I had. I found myself working for a big corporate in Bristol, commuting from Swansea, so 2 hours there, 2 hours back every day. Wasn't really compatible with having kids. The big corporate was a big company. I'm sure you're familiar with them, Siemens. And at the time, the company I was working for got bought by them, and it felt like being assimilated into the Borg to some extent. But I think one thing that it made me realise was that governments, big corporations, you can't rely on them to get your work-life balance right. You need, if it's something that you want to prioritise, you need to take control of that. And maybe I took the drastic option, but I decided to leave and move back to Swansea and see what opportunities were here in Swansea. 6 years on, having suffered at least one serious episode of work burnout, I found myself in the great position of having too many options of things I could do, things that I was passionate about, but it was really stressing me out. Which direction do I go? Like, one of my problems is I'm a sucker for taking on too much. Things I'm interested in, I want to get involved, make a difference. Growing up, my friends always made fun of me, saying I suffered from something called FOMO, which some of you may have come across, fear of missing out. Since having kids, my wife suggests that I've kind of transferred that to my working life. So I found myself getting involved in loads and loads of different, really interesting projects, but really spreading myself too thin. Leading to burnout, which the result of that meant me going home, not having the mental capacity to properly engage with my children, and I just found that depressing. So work-life balance, for me, I saw as a really important thing. But I ended up going through what I found was quite a valuable process in identifying what was important to me, what my priorities were, and weighting them accordingly. Work-life balance came out as a top priority, which I guess isn't revolutionary. In surveys that have been done, 80% of people in the UK looking at new jobs, work-life balance is one of the top things that they're looking for. But for me, it was an important process to go through. It made me acknowledge that as a top priority, but also made me acknowledge that I've got boundaries. I'm not Superman, I can't do everything. I'm now only juggling 4 jobs, which sounds silly, but I've managed to get myself in a position where 2 of them are running my own companies, so I've got control, got the flexibility there. One of them's working for a community interest company, so you don't have that pressure from the private industry. And one of them is helping start up a not-for-profit energy supply company in Swansea. How long have I got left?
No.
None. So I haven't said anything about actually what I do. But maybe I can come back and do another talk. So just, have I got time just to...
We love you, Joe.
Questions later.
We'll do a Q&A later, which...
There'll be questions later, yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap up, a few observations. Work-life balance, I think, is relevant to everyone, not just the privileged few, and I think it's something we should all be focused on. You can't rely on government or corporations or other people to help you get that balance in place. You need to take control of it where you can, even if it's just small changes, and design something that works for you and your family in your personal life. And a big lesson for me out of all of that is being clear about my priorities. You need to prioritize yourself, your mental health, your family, friends, spirituality, faith, whatever's important to you. But yeah, you need to focus on making sure that works for you.